All right, let's jump right into this. Today we're exploring a pretty wild idea, one that uses the laws of physics to explain the chaos of human history. And the core idea? Get this. Inanimate objects are actually better at organizing themselves than we are.
Yeah, just let that sink in for a moment. It's a pretty bold statement, right? On one hand, you've got the physical universe, this elegant, predictable dance of matter. And on the other hand, well, you've got us, humanity. All of our conflict, all of our chaos, and this explainer is all about digging into that contrast.
So what's the fundamental problem here? Well, this slide lays it out perfectly. Rocks are simple. They just obey the rules. They follow gravity, they take the path of least resistance, and they find a stable equilibrium. But people? Oh, we have agency. We can choose to resist, we can choose to fight, we can choose to be completely illogical. And that choice is the source of all conflict, and it's the entire reason we need something called governance to begin with.
So that brings us to our first big concept here, the friction of people. It's this idea that explains what stops us from getting that smooth, rock-like order. Why can't we all just fall toward the same center of gravity? And this definition from the source material is absolutely crucial to understanding this. Governance is not a natural state. Rocks don't need a government, right? It's a human invention, a constant, and let's be honest, often failing attempt to create some order where our own nature invites chaos. It exists for one reason and one reason only, because we can break the rules.
So why don't we just fall in line? Well, there are a few huge reasons. First, we have competing interests. We can't even agree on what the biggest rock, our shared goal, should even be. Second, we have a capacity for irrationality. We don't just follow logic. We make decisions based on emotion, on morals, even on spite. We'll often choose the path of most resistance. And finally, there's the big one, the burden of choice. Unlike rocks, we have free will, which is just another way of saying we have the absolute freedom to rebel against any system.
Okay, so if we're so chaotic, how does this framework propose any kind of solution? Well, let's move to the next layer of this metaphor, which introduces a fascinating concept, theological gravity. So to solve that problem of everyone wanting to fall towards a different rock, the source material pulls in a theological concept. It suggests that there is a true center of mass for all of humanity, an ultimate moral and structural authority. The idea is that just as physical gravity tells rocks where to go, this theological gravity is what's supposed to dictate the proper order for all of society. It's the one biggest rock for everyone.
But, and this is a huge but, earthly governments are not that ultimate rock. According to this framework, they're just flawed proxies. Think of them as smaller rocks trying to channel the gravitational pull of the real thing. And because our leaders are also just rocks, people with that same chaotic agency, these systems are pretty much inevitably going to be corrupt and fail.
So if all of our human systems are flawed, then what does that mean for history? Well, let's scale this whole metaphor up and look at the entire sweep of human history as one giant, cosmic demolition and construction project.
And this quote just brilliantly captures the idea. The crashes, the fall of empires, the chaos, it isn't meaningless. In this model, the destruction is actually a necessary part of the building process. The cracks and the gaps that open up when things fall apart, well, that's not a bug, it's a feature.
The source breaks this process down into 4 stages. First, our systems crash. They're unstable, so they shatter. Second, the waters, that's us, people and nations, rush in to fill those power vacuums. Then comes the fire. The friction of all that conflict and judgment acts like a forge, burning away all the impurities. And finally, out of all that, meta-rocks are formed, where the broken pieces of old systems get fused together into new, stronger structures.
Now, the key takeaway here is that this isn't some endless, random cycle of destruction. It's teleological, which is just a fancy way of saying it has a goal. It's going somewhere. All of this crashing and reforming is building toward one specific, final, permanent, and unshakable structure. Okay, so keeping that construction model in mind, let's look at what the source considers the single most unstable and dangerous design a society could possibly have.
It's called the Babel, and it's basically an inverted pyramid. You have all the weight, all the power, the entire identity of a civilization balanced on the fragile single point of one mortal leader. I mean, it's a design that just completely defies structural logic.
And it is absolutely guaranteed to fail. First, you have a single point of failure. The foundation is biological. It's a person who is guaranteed to die, and when they do, the whole thing implodes. Second, you have amplified tremors.
A tiny mistake from the leader at the bottom creates these massive shockwaves at the top. And finally, you need this artificial gravity. Since one person doesn't have the mass to hold it all together, they have to use coercion and fear just to keep the unnatural structure from flying apart.
So this brings us to our final and maybe most practical point. How does this framework help us understand the massive upheavals that we see in the world all around us?
And that leads to the big question, right? Is all this turmoil, all this historical crashing, just random, pointless destruction? Is there actually a purpose to all the shaking? Well, according to this model, the answer is a firm no. The chaos isn't destruction. It's a process called underpinning. Think about a construction crew trying to replace the foundation of a skyscraper. It's a painful, violent process of transferring the entire weight of the building from its old, cracked foundation onto brand new, solid bedrock.
And this quote just captures the ultimate goal perfectly. A societal earthquake is like a diagnostic test. Its whole purpose is to violently shake everything until all the unstable structures, all those inverted pyramids built on mortal foundations, shatter and fall away.
So those violent shifts, the crashes, and the conflicts, they're seen as the growing pains of a new structure that's finally settling into its true permanent equilibrium. It's the release of all that artificial tension that was used to hold up the old, flawed systems.
Which leaves us with a final and pretty provocative thought. If history is this grand, violent, and purposeful construction project, what does that mean for us? What does it feel like to be one of the individual rocks caught right in the middle of a global earthquake, as everything is shaken down to its very foundations?